Dog Pound Daily. Thank you, Jay, for summoning those. First thing they ask about is the backup quarterback spot, because for some reason in preseason we care so much about it, and then we never care about it again. It's a question of Garrett Gilbert versus Drew Stanton. I will just tell you that if I had a vote, it would be for Drew Stanton. If you forget, he has the single greatest sideline dance of all time while the starters on his team scored a touchdown. Google Drew Stanton dance. It's the best thing in the world. Going back to wide receiver battle, sort of like we did with Green Bay. Obviously, we already mentioned Odell Beckham Jr., Jarvis Landry. They've got Rashard Higgins as well. So their top three are pretty set. But on an NFL team, you usually have, 6, 7, maybe even 8 wide receivers, and that's going to be really interesting to see. So anyway, is suspended. But when he's back, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's got a spot waiting for him, because the rest of the group has played pretty well. Jalen Strong, Derek Willis, DJ Montgomery, they've all done well, although Montgomery is with a hamstring injury. Keep an eye on those second-tier wide receivers once the big three go out. You, especially this being week 3, you are probably looking at whoever performs the best earns themselves a spot in the lineup. Going back to kicker questions, they have junk kickers. I think there's a kicking shortage in the NFL because there are so few guys that we are bringing in.
Carly Lloyd.
We're bringing in soccer players who can nail 55-yarders, which, as far as I know, nobody's made a 43-yarder in Chicago in 40 years.
There's got to be a Grammatica somewhere. I think there's got to be one bird of the last 25 years.
I mean, there's got to be a son of a Grammatica, right? I mean,
exactly.
Those guys are old. Their kids are grandson now at this point.
Talk about great celebrations and tearing your ACL. That's a great video.
So there you go. Watch the Browns, watch the wide receivers, see if Baker Mayfield chugs a beer during the game. There you have it.
All right. Also, an 8 p.m. kickoff on CBS. It's the Buffalo Bills at the Detroit Lions at Ford Field. Rob lets us know, national TV game for national treasure and American hero Josh Allen. Can he keep up picking apart vanilla defenses? Expect to see more reps with Cole Beasley. Word out of camp, by the way, is that Cole Beasley has definitely been snuggling up to Josh Allen, turning into Josh Allen's whoopee. That's another fantasy tip for you guys. Basically, slot receivers and tight ends, especially for young quarterbacks,
will be
There's
nice
a fantasy tip for you guys. All right. Who takes the 4th running back spot? TJ Yeldon or Sonoris Perry? Yeldon, the better running back, but Perry is a beast on special teams. And honestly, when it comes to your 4th running back position, you want the guy who plays special teams. The 6th wide receiver spot, Bills are weirdly deep at wide receiver. This is a common thread that's starting to emerge. Teams are deep at wide receiver. So apparently the XFL is going to have some great wide receivers.
Well, I mean, to be fair, everyone thinks they're deep at wide receiver until their fifth wide receiver can't separate at all.
Pro tip to the kids, don't become a wide receiver. There's a log jam. Learn to be a kicker. You don't even have to be good, and you'll make a team.
It's a good point.
Or learn to be a quarterback, and you can get $35 million for being mediocre.
Holding a clipboard. Hold on a quick second.
Or 40 if the DAC reports come around.
Not true. False. Fake news.
Which part? The mediocre part or the 40 million part?
Wow. The 40 million. The mediocre was true for a little bit last year. Now he's slightly above average, as I've always said.
All right. Josh asks, is this really a dress rehearsal week? Seems like more and more each year we're moving towards the preseason being more meaningless to coaches and the starters and more meaningful towards filtering through the depth and hoping everyone stays healthy. That's also been the common thread. Lots of people aren't going to be playing their starters this week. On offense, just a couple spots where depth is getting sorted, mostly who's the 4th wide receiver with Curse going down. He bets it's Brandon Powell. Yesterday they signed Jordan Lashley, not Jordan Lashley, who's a WWE wrestler, instead of Dontrell Inman. Joe Dahl is the favorite to win the battle at guard. Not surprising, given his recent contract extension. On defense, believes that they could actually have some linebacker depth now. Jalen Reeves-Maben played his butt off last week, turned some heads. Same with the rookie second rounder. Very nice to see the dude out there diagnosing plays and making the right reads. Secondary looks to have a couple of young studs from this year's draft, but they need to continue to prove they belong on the field. And breaking news, Snack signed an extension that keeps him as the centerpiece of this ridiculous defensive front through 2021. Hell yes. So there you go. That's the way contracts get done. Although, I guess we'll talk about contracts soon with the Dallas Cowboys, won't we?
You like their road.
Saturday kickoff, 1 o'clock in the afternoon on the NFL Network, US Bank Stadium. Justin, it is the Arizona Cardinals and Minnesota Vikings.
Woo! Gotta love this one. So, as always, we start off with our Kyler Murray watch. He did not have a good week last week, which I know Dr. Jones largely chalks up to the fact that his offensive line was basically non-existent. It was more offensive than offensive. So definitely keep your eyes on him. I don't know if they're going to follow the dress rehearsal model or do more of that. All the starters really, really take it easy, like is becoming more common. But if they do, I am curious to see if we get any kind of look at what a Cliff Kingsbury offense actually looks like. That to me is something that I still haven't quite figured out exactly what they're doing. I mean, I could wax poetically about how, a failure of a college coach somehow becoming an NFL head coach seems like a bit of a strange move, but who am I to cast aspersions at them? On the Minneapolis side of the ball, though, I do want to see what's going on at wide receiver. Again, I know it sounds like we're talking a lot about wide receivers. Here's the thing about wide receivers, though. They are probably the position group where you have the most bodies. That's, out, if we're not counting offensive line as a whole group or DBs as a group. And you really do need them to fill out your special teams because usually you have some big, strong, fast guys. Obviously, they have Adam Thielen. Obviously, they have Stephon Diggs. The write-up we mentioned Chad Beebe or Beebe, I don't know how you pronounce that.
But go with Beebe.
The real question, yeah, we'll go with Beebe. So the big question is, are we going to see the wideouts the next two down contribute, and who's going to be returning punts, who's going to catching kickoffs, those kind of things. Mentions BC Johnson, who had 2 catches for 35 yards in a score against New Orleans. Brendan Zylstra, who was 5 for 5 on targets. And for a team that, at least last year, ended up pretty pass happy with their really, really expensive but not very good quarterback, that's a pretty important thing for them. As always, we're talking about some of these offensive line because just like there's a shortage of kickers in the league, there's definitely a shortage of offensive line players in the league. So here's my pro tip to you, listener. Feature Kid a lot, but also have him kick a lot. That way, 50-50 chance he could fill one of these two jobs. We're still at 90-man rosters, so you have a lot of players trying to squeeze into a few positions. So they've got their starting 5 set, but you often play in the NFL nowadays, especially if they're going to do a little bit more of that Schottenheimer tree, Gary Kubiak zone rushing stuff. You're going to see a lot more 6 lineman sets. So whoever fills in the next spot is going to be is going to see a lot of playing time. So that's going to have a lot to do with it. So there's talk about versatility. Rashad Hill can play both tackle spots. So he's a guy who will probably get a lot of looks. Avante Collins hasn't been healthy, but he can play tackle or guard as well. So these are guys in particular that if they do make the team are going to be really, really key if they're going to run the offense that they want to run, even though it's not the offense run by their offensive coordinator, but I digress. So offensive line, wide receiver, Kyler Murray. That's it.
All right, so 7 o'clock kickoff, NFL Network, AT&T Stadium, the Houston Texans at the Dallas Cowboys, Kevin.
Well, let's first start with the inferior team like we always do. So we'll start with the Houston Texans. James Call is claiming this the Governor's Cup, so I much like that name, honestly. But this
apparently it's a real thing.
No, who knew? Not me, because it's not an important game. But This is a game holdout battle between Zeke and Jadeveon Clowney. Probably more interesting to watch those two play Madden on the big screen while the rest of the fans watch the game on the field. At least according to James. And I'm honestly on board with that because usually NFL players are pretty decent at Madden. But anywho's, real football, biggest roster battles to watch out for is in the secondary, A.J. Moore versus Chris Johnson and Bodie Calhoun. Two of those three are going to make the roster. But Calhoun is slowly working his way down the roster with Chris Johnson moving his way up. And the secondary can get all the help they can. The O-line right now, he's saying it wouldn't be crazy to start the season with 11 offensive linemen on the roster. To me, that's crazy. And he only brings this up because they got Dwayne Brown. The pick that they got from Dwayne Brown turned into Martinez Rankin, was the 11th guy and is on the bubble and is only in his second year after being a third-round pick, which just means that the Texans, according to James, are really bad at evaluating and coaching O-line. Wide receiver, running back with Kiki and Fuller are their status is to be determined. DeAndre Carter may end up starting as the wide receiver 2 in week 1, which means Tyron Johnson and Vincent Smith should see significant playing time to make a case to make the 53-man roster. And just to close it off, a rant on Bill O'Brien.
This is a fantastic rant.
I'm going to read it verbatim. Is he the least inspiring coach in the league? Almost certainly. Take the clock and challenge management skills of Andy Reid, the coaching connections of Cliff Kingsbury, the playoff prowess of Marvin Lewis, the press conference demeanor of Bill Belichick, the play calling of Chuck Pagano, and the risk aversion of Mike Mularkey. Although I would probably switch Mike Mularkey with Brian Schottenheimer, and you have roughly his persona. His most interesting feature is that he keeps his challenge flag in his chin dimple. He's best known for at one time he yelled at Tom Brady. How anyone, much less multiple people, can lose a power struggle to him should reflect more poorly on them than speak highly of him. And that's all we got about the Texans because we don't have any more time for them. Now we'll go to Dallas. Speaking of contracts, the Cowboys just signed a brilliant contract extension with Jalen Smith, inking him $35 million guarantee, which is the third highest, but his average annual salary is only $12.8 million. And he's one of the best ascending linebackers in the league, along with fellow linebacker Leighton Vander Esch, who will most certainly see his contract extension coming down the line years later. But compare that 12.8 to, I know Bobby Wagner is the best linebacker in the league. You're welcome, Justin. He makes $18 million a year. And C.J. Mosley, just who signed with the Jets, is making $17 million a year. So getting Jalen Smith, who is fully recovered, young, and is just a dynamic athlete for only $12.8 million a year, it was honestly a brilliant deal. And hopefully it just sparks the dominoes for things to come. And I really have
I don't know, because at the press conference, Jerry Jones made a point to highlight how he took the discount and mentioned that Jalen understands that to have a young team, and keep all of this talent around you, you can't take as much of the pie as you possibly can. Oh boy, was that a smack in the face again to Ezekiel Elliott, Dak Prescott, these guys just aren't going to resign. It's just not going to happen.
Wait,
now.
Zeke who?
Well, first,
right?
Yeah, Zeke. I'm more concerned with Zeke. Dak and Cooper, I'm not concerned about at all. Dak is going to get his money eventually. He's going to play this year regardless if he gets an extension before the season. Same with Cooper. Speaking of Cooper, though, he's not going to play the rest of the preseason. He's a mild case of plantar fasciitis, but he did say, if the first regular season game were to be this Sunday, he would most definitely be playing. And then speaking of Zeke, I'm really looking forward to Tony Pollard, because if Zeke does miss games, he's going to be his main backup, along probably with Alfred Morris. But Tony Pollard looked really electric last week against the Rams, scoring his first NFL touchdown. Also had a reception, but he did miss a key block deep in Cowboys territory, which almost led to yet another Dak Prescott fumble because he held it onto the ball for too long. But other than that, the first team offense, I don't know how we're getting into a recap of last week's game, but we are. did really well. Dak's 9 for 9 so far in the preseason. And he just looks really good. His connection with Michael Gallup looks really good. And I expect, much like everyone said, I do expect a lot of the Cowboys starters to play, minus Amari Cooper, Zeke, obviously, Tyron Smith, and Zach Martin. The latter two just for precautionary reasons because